Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I am Miranda and I like to post kind of bookish videos. I wish I could say I read a ton of books, but life always gets in the way, and so I don't read as much as I would like to, but I am kind of in a little bit of a reading slump right now, and I feel like work and school have been super busy, so I haven't had a ton of time to read, but I wanted to make kind of a fun bookish video. So I decided to go and pick out some of my favorite books and some books that I've rated 5 stars, a high 4-star. And I thought it would be fun to go onto Goodreads and read some of the 1-star reviews of these books. I have 10 books here. 8 of them are like some of my favorite books, but 2 of them are 2 books that I just really didn't love, and I thought it'd be fun to kind of see if people agreed with my thoughts on those, or like what some of the highest reviews on those were, like why people like them, just kind of from the opposite end of the spectrum. And I have a little bit of a mixture. I'm definitely more of a fantasy reader, so a lot of my higher star rating books tend to be fantasy, YA fantasy books. Okay. Yeah. Continuing. So the first book that I think I'm going to look up is one that I haven't read for a while, but it's definitely like always and always will be one of my favorite books, and that is really all the Harry Potter books, but one of my favorite ones in the series is The Prisoner of Azkaban, the 3rd book. The average rating for this book is a 4.58, and it has over 4 million ratings, which is insane to me. These novels have amazing world building but are not very well written. The villain is one-dimensional, the storyline is overly simplistic, the adults are criminally negligent, and the author became the villain in real life. Yeah, that is... I feel like they left so much to a bunch of 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, just truly children throughout the course of this book and the whole series. But I don't know, as a kid when I was reading these initially, when I was in like middle school, I loved that. I was like, it's so cool that the kids are doing it, but being an adult and being older and reading it, you're like, how come no one else was taking care of this? Like, there was perfectly capable people who were trained wizards, and yet they left it to the kid who had never known that he could use magic. Harry has a lot of unlikely saviors in these novels. By now it's clear that Harry is never truly in danger, since someone or something will always show up in the nick of time to rescue him. I hate these books. They're horribly written. The author just makes stuff up at the end to resolve the books. This one was a pain to finish. Any Potterheads will loathe me for this, but I really hate this book. I love Sirius Black and I was excited at the beginning to read about him. Little did I know I was going to get tens and tens of pages about Quidditch matches and secret visits to Hogsmeade. So yeah, I feel like the majority of these are that it was a lot about the author, which I agree, but at the same time, like, this book had such a special impact on my life when I was younger, so I feel like, I don't know, I personally a lot of times separate authors from the books, and I don't know, I don't really look into authors too much. I probably should, but I've owned these books for a long time. I'm not gonna get rid of them because I don't agree with the author. The next one that I'm gonna look up is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This was my first Alice Feeney book that I read, and so far it's still my favorite one. I think I've only read 2. I've read this one and Rock, Paper, Scissors. I don't know, this one, just the twist at the end was not at all what I was expecting. This one has an average of 3.77 on Goodreads with just over 200,000 reviews. I'm a huge Feeney fan and have loved everything of hers that I've read so far until now. First of all, I hated all of the characters, which is normally not a problem for me if they're interesting and intriguing, but this cast was neither of those things. Everyone in this book is shivering, trembling, or tutting and tisking, enough so that I not only picked up on it, but it also became annoyed by it. I'm not a fan of locked room mysteries because this was Feeney. I wanted to keep an open mind. The way that people spoke in this drove me bananas, especially Nana. It's as if Feeney wanted her portrayed as the wisest woman to have ever walked the earth. I was so bored there wasn't enough suspense or excitement for me, even when they discovered the bodies. Their reactions felt like they had stained the carpet instead. This book was so terrible that it ruined my entire day. Utterly disappointing wooden characters, predictable plot, and a very frustrating final twist. Literally one of my most hated thriller endings. Things I hated, an incomplete list. The plot, incredibly stupid. I'd be impressed if it came out of an 8th grade creative writing class, but it didn't. The dialogue, I'm not convinced Feeney has interacted with real humans. The characters are straight garbage. Their behavior, backstories, motivation, none of it checks out. Never reading a Feeney book again. I finished this before my online library loan expired, but honestly, it would have been for the best if I never read it. I was just so bored, and I wanted so badly for these characters to develop past constant stories about their pasts. Just stupid. I hated it, hated the plot twist, and couldn't even remotely believe the motivation for the murders. This was one of the most preposterous stories I've ever read. To be fair, murder mysteries are not my genre, and I'm probably the wrong person to review this kind of book. I guess maybe I don't remember their reactions. But that wasn't a big deal to me. Like, it was still the point of it. Like, I wasn't reading this for the characters and the believability of it. The twist at the end was what I enjoyed. I enjoyed her writing. But I definitely understand, like, this is very much so, like, a whodunit type of mystery. And I know there's a lot of people who don't enjoy that. Like, The Guest List and The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley are very similar to this book. And so I feel like if you read a bunch of those, it can become very repetitive. But I don't know, this wasn't the first. I read The Guest List, then I read this, then I read The Paris Apartment, and of the three, this one was my favorite, even though they all were like a similar kind of concept. And then going on to the next one, which is probably one of my all-time favorite books, is Six of Crows. I read this one when I first got back into reading in 2021, and I haven't read it since. I've kind of wanted to reread it, but I feel like there's other books that I want to read for the first time before I go back to it. This one has an average of 4.48 stars and just over 1 million reviews. I'm going to start with saying this. I am a romance reader. Not many books that don't have any romance can interest me. Now, with that being said, I have read many books before with absolutely zero romance and liked them. This seemed like a very liked book by others, and that's why I decided to give it a try. I tried to give it a try until page 220. I swear at times I felt like I wasn't even reading English. I did not read Shadow and Bones, so I didn't know the world building, and I didn't know it was needed to read those books either. Anyway, you get thrown into a fantasy world with zero explanation. I still didn't know if certain words were people's names, places, or things. Which I didn't read Shadow and Bone. I still haven't read it. And I read this book, and it did, like, parts of it, I felt like you were kind of, like, thrown into the world of, like, some of the, like, slight magic system that's in here. But I feel like I figured it out. But it might be because I'm, like, already a fantasy reader. But I feel like I wasn't, like, I didn't feel that confused by it. It always displeases me when I have to give a bad review of a book, but it would be dishonest to sugarcoat my feelings towards this book. It seemed like with every new chapter I could find a new deal breaker problem with the story, and it was not a pleasant experience at all. DNF with about 100 pages left. I can't do it, guys. I tried. I really did. But I'm making myself miserable forcing myself to read this book. I bought this book and started reading it, but it was really not that interesting. It used a lot of creative words and names, but that made the book very confusing. Disappointing. This is the best you've got. Life is too short to read a bad book, and unfortunately for me, this is a bad book. My math book just got better. Every day I wonder why this series got so popular. This book was so mind-numbingly boring. I thought I must be reading a different book than everyone else. Yikes, why is this popular? I absolutely do not understand the hype of this book. So disappointing. Nina is the one saving grace. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I could not finish this book. In fact, more specifically, I could not bring myself to pick up Six of Crows after I reached the second half. I don't know, I feel like this was a book that, like, I don't know. This is a tough one for me to, like, understand why people didn't like it. But I think because it got really hyped up for a while, that it kind of brought people who this maybe wasn't necessarily their genre into it. And I feel like I remember seeing a few things that, like, were trying to, like, hype up a romance in this book that just was not there. This is not a romance book. This is not, like, at all that. And I don't know, I feel like I read this, and reading this, like, introduced me to ACOTAR. And so I feel like a lot of people who read ACOTAR were reading this book and somehow trying to compare them, and that's just not what this is. This is very much like an atmospheric book, and I loved the atmosphere and the environment of this. It felt very Victorian, it felt very, like, old world, and I loved that there was, like, magic in the book, but it wasn't too extreme. And the whole time I was reading this book, I just, like, kept thinking how, like, I wish I could see it as a movie. Like, I wanted to see it, like, played out on a screen. So then going on to the next one. It's another one that, this one I don't think I rated 5 stars, but it was like a high 4-star, and I just don't hear a ton about it, so I thought it'd be interesting to include, and that is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I will constantly rave about this book in this series just because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. So on Goodreads it has an average of 4.2 stars and 260,000 ratings. This novel is about supervillains trying to get revenge on each other. My reaction after reading half the book was, why so many 4- and 5-star reviews? The characters seemed so shallow to me, and the concept wasn't original, and the writing and dialogue were pretty average. So clearly I missed whatever it was that made this book genius. I have been avoiding writing this review because I have nothing to say. The characters had no personality. I could not have cared less if they had all died. That's harsh. DNF at 35%. For starters, I didn't really like all the back and forth through time every chapter. I do get that. I feel like I don't mind when it's like 2 timelines, like a past, present, but this was like present 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years. Like, it was like so back and forth. And it wasn't even like you were going back to the same timeline, but at the same time, like, I feel like that was needed because, like, I wouldn't have wanted to live through them like 5-10 years in the making. But I do agree, like, some of the back and forth where it was like cutting off like present day by like around 10 a.m. and then you'd read about the past for a little bit and then it'd be like noon. So it was like very much so like cutting off what was happening real time to go back and tell like things about their past. The only thing that was vicious was how badly I slammed the book down in boredom. Can I give half a star? Sequencing problems, often irrelevant backstory, not fun. I wish I DNF'd it and didn't waste my time reading until the end. Couldn't finish it. I really wanted to, but I found the story not engaging, and the constant shift in time and POV coupled with military tone narrator made it impossible for me. Where to begin with this one? Let's use an analogy. This book is a piece of chicken that you forgot to season before putting it in the oven, dry out from cooking too long, choke on as you try to desperately clear your airway, and you eventually die. Cool concept, poor execution, extremely boring, flat writing, cardboard cutout characters. So boring, there's nothing I liked. The promising premise, but so horribly executed. The author cannot at all deal with the complexities of the characters they tried to create, and it became flat and boring. I hate this book, absolutely hate it. It was a chore. Also, the characters were boring. Genuinely one of the worst books I've ever had the displeasure of reading. Never been so confused by popular sentiment about something before. It's okay. That's the best I can say. There's too much hype on this book. I read it. The idea is interesting, nice characters, and good pace. It has that feeling like I've been there too many times before. In the end, none of the characters are impressive. They are kind of bland. This is another one that I feel like I would be intrigued to read again, but I don't know. I feel like the more I hear about this book and how people don't like it, like it does bring up like that this wasn't like the best book. But for me, I just thought it was a really cool concept of kind of like Six of Crows, like a lot of it was just like a fiction book, but there was like touches of magic, and that's what I thought was interesting. Next one that I'm gonna do is another one kind of like Harry Potter, where I love the whole series, but I just picked one of my favorites from the series, and that is Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. I like The Throne of Glass is probably my favorite series. I keep Harry Potter like up on that list just because I read that as a kid, and like the movies and stuff have such a deep meaning to me. But like Throne of Glass, I absolutely love the entire experience of reading it. It has an average of 4.6 stars and 830,000 ratings. I don't care about any of the characters that I'm supposed to care about anymore. The longer you spend with SJM's characters, the more it seems like she's completely incapable of keeping characters consistent or giving them realistic development. The plot in this was a staggering and narrative mess. On the whole, we spend a lot of time watching people with more knowledge than our protagonist trying to tell her what she needs to do, and her promptly telling them, "Sorry, y'all, I have more important things to do." The writing in this is lazy. I honestly wish SJM wasn't contracted to release 2 books a year, because it's obvious she could afford more time to polish these books. DNF at 60%, 1 star for Manon Blackbeak. Well, I tried. Dorian Havillard was not born for this disrespect. What absolute garbage. This is easily the worst book I've ever read. SJM is terrible at writing, terrible at plotting, and a complete parody of herself. I wish I could go back in time and stop myself from reading this series. When you forgot your own characters and character development and narrative all exist. So, on the same vein as this one, I feel like I have to like pick up the pace, because otherwise this is going to be like an hour-long video. But getting through them. Another book by SJM that I personally really enjoyed. My favorite book in the ACOTAR series was the 3rd one, A Court of Wings and Ruin, but I know a lot of people didn't love that book. A lot of people loved the 2nd one a lot more. But I've said it before, I feel like if you are reading ACOTAR for the romance and the characters, you'll like the 2nd one the most, but if you're reading it for the plot and the magic system, you'd like the 3rd one the most. I like the politics, I like the magic system, typically more than I care about the relationship or the romance. I like character development as a whole. I don't need as much of the romance. But that being said, A Court of Wings and Ruin still has an average of 4.48 stars and almost 2 million reviews, or 2 million ratings. So it still is very well loved. 202, that's the number of times the word mate in its hellish forms is used. 202. Too bloody long, definitely not worth the time. Maybe I was high on Reese's Glamour while reading the last book and put it on the pedestal, but now I see so many flaws in the characters, in the plot, and the narration, it makes me miss Amarantha. I'm sorry, it's just so obvious that SJM had no plans whatsoever to make more gay until she faced backlash for her lack of diversity. I can see that. I feel like she kind of changed the way she was writing somewhat throughout the series to please like what the people wanted, and so it didn't make things, and I feel like I saw this a little bit with Throne of Glass as well. Like she kind of changed where she was going partially through the book, so it kind of didn't, you could tell it wasn't planned. I vomit a little in my mouth every time I see someone gushing over Rhysand or any mails written by SJM. Boring, jealous, and toxic. This was one of my most looked forward to books of 2017, but sadly I barely enjoyed it. Where do I even begin? I guess I can start by asking those who actually gave this series 5 stars, why? Trust me, this was a big disappointment for me, even though I never liked this trilogy. It took me 4 months to finish this book, and I nearly gave up on it, but I'm glad I didn't because the ending was so wonderful. I love the setting and the cast, and I just want to give everyone a huge hug. However, this book was so slow, I couldn't remember anything from the previous novels, the first 70%, and I didn't want to read it. I'm either getting older and less interested in her ideas, or the quality of Mass's work is slipping big time. I'm officially giving up on this author. She needs to go back to the drawing board. This book is so boring, serious pacing issues, and I think the characters are all starting to seem similar. The awkwardly written sex scenes are neither steamy nor enticing. I agree with that. I feel like every time there was like a spicy scene in ACOTAR, I just cringed. Like, I could not. And that's why I didn't like the second book, was I was like, this is odd. This is weird to me. We finally did it, boys. We found a book I hate more than Fahrenheit 451. I put the same amount of effort into this review as SJM's editor. This was a complete disappointment. SJM will be hearing from my lawyer soon. The Silent Patient is the next one. And this was one that I've read now 3 books by Alex Michaelides, and this one was absolutely my favorite one of them. I only rated this one 4 stars because I think there's other mysteries that I have preferred overall. But I think looking back, this one would be more of like a 4.5, like closer to a 5-star. So this book has an average of 4.18 stars and has 2.5 million ratings. Read anything else on your TBR first. Anything. Better yet, delete The Silent Patient from your TBR. Not silent enough. This was the biggest waste of my time. This book was utter trash from beginning to end, irredeemable hot garbage. I will never for my life understand how it has 300,000 ratings on Goodreads. DNF at 25%. This is terrible. I hope she stays silent. This was insufferable. I do not know why, but I hate everything about this book. I do not even understand why people like this book. An easy read and quite possibly the stupidest waste of my time. Books like this are what happen when everything is in service of the plot twist. Some men can't write women for the life of them. Wow, this was not what I expected, and not in a good way. The Silent Patient is one of those heavily hyped books that fails to deliver. Has the author even bothered doing the smallest bit of research in psychology before writing this? There was a lot wrong in there. That was the worst and most boring thriller I've read so far. The biggest problem is that it's not a thrill at all. Guess popular books most of the time aren't to my liking. I honestly don't know why. Sadly, I didn't feel like this book was a psychological thriller. It didn't excite me at all. What a snooze fest. I started reading this novel after seeing it in one of the top most read books on Goodreads. Plus it was a thriller, so I gave it a go. Stupid plot twist. If I could only burn one book in my lifetime, this would be the one. Bland characters, bland writing, limited dumb plot. The twist ending is okay, I guess. This has been sitting on my shelf for over a year. Maybe I should have left it there. Extremely boring and predictable. I feel like for this book, I kind of predicted some of the end, but not to the extent of the plot twist. But I don't know, I loved that they added, like the way they added the psychology aspect into this book. I thought it was interesting. Wasn't necessarily maybe the most accurate, I don't know. But I've always enjoyed like psychology, and like I liked the way that this book kind of like made me think. So then the last book that I want to look at the 1-star reviews of is one of my most recent 5 stars, and that is Happy Place by Emily Henry. And I feel like this one will probably have some pretty good 1-star reviews because I feel like I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about this book in general. Her books are very much so like, if you read them at the right time and the right place in your life, you love them. If not, they're just okay. So this one has an average rating of 3.98 stars and just over 1 million reviews. When I die, I want Emily Henry to lower me into my grave so she can let me down one last time. DNF at 48%. I physically can't take this book anymore. It's so bad I want to delete it out of my brain chemistry. I've wasted my life, breath, and time trying to get to the middle of this book. Okay, 53% in and I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I'm becoming the worst version of myself as I try to force myself to continue. I was so irritated with this book, I basically hate Reddit. So much eye rolling, so much miscommunication. These characters are so idiotic with their decisions. I'm breaking up with you, Emily. It's not me, it's you. I'm sorry. I just don't like her writing style that much. The story was a bit dull and I didn't like any of the characters. This is easily one of the worst romances I've ever read. This review is rushed because I'm too annoyed and pissed to form a proper review. And simply saying, I don't care. Not my happy place. DNF, unpopular opinion, but you don't need to be so descriptive with every other word. Y'all lied. I truly feel like I'm on an episode of Punk'd. I had to force myself to finish this book. It was boring. It felt like middle school drama. A lot of miscommunication between a couple and among friends. Are you really trying to tell me that Harriet and Wynne, who are 30 years old and were together for 10 years, can't communicate about their mental health? Even the friends can't communicate. All these people need therapy. It took me 4 days to read this, and respectfully, they were the most painful 4 days of my life. Did Emily Henry actually write this one, or is this a practical joke? This is my least favorite Emily Henry book. I really wanted to love it since it was advertised as fake dating and one-bed trope. Yeah, it is kind of fake dating. I feel like it's a very different type of fake dating than like your stereotypical fake dating, because they were a couple and they were just pretending to still be a couple. I feel like it makes it different than like some of the other ones where like I'm thinking like I haven't read the Unhoneymooners, but like where they have to go on a vacation and pretend to be together but they haven't been together. I feel like that's what a lot of people think of when they think of fake dating, is people who weren't together and have to pretend to be together and then end up falling in love. But this book was definitely not that, and I love that about this book. I loved that it wasn't a romance. Like, I would not advertise this as a romance, and I think that's why so many people disliked it. Was if you go into it thinking it's going to be like a fun, happy rom-com, that's not what you're going to get. And like I said, that's why I loved it. I loved that it was more like we got to see their growth. We got to see them kind of figuring themselves out and learning how to figure out who they are and what they want, and then learning how to adapt that into their romantic relationship as well as their friendships. And I don't know, I liked that about it. I liked that like we kind of got to see how friendships evolve when you're not the same people you were when you were in college. But I will say, I would never advertise this as a romance. Is there romance in here? Yes, but that's not like the main point of this book. So then the last two that I want to talk about are two that I didn't really like. And one of them I read a long time ago, and honestly haven't thought about it since I read it. And that's Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. I just remember I was very frustrated like the whole time that I read this book. But I got it as a book of the month book, and it sounded interesting, and I think I was just let down because the description that was given on book of the month didn't match the book. So this one has an average of 3.56 stars and 138,000 ratings. So I want to look at some of the 1 stars and just then go and like look at some of the 5 stars and see why people liked it. Just don't have a good word to say about it, really. Incredibly surface level, not even vaguely thrilling until the last 50 pages, and it just felt dumb in the end. This book needs some serious therapy. What even was that? I haven't read a Rachel Hawkins book in years. I couldn't remember why either. Now I do. Oof, nothing happened until it did, and then the book was over. The audiobook was only 7.5 hours, but it felt so much longer. So then I want to look at some of the people who did rate it 5 stars and see what they say. This is a suspense mystery. This is not one of those books that pulled me in from the beginning, but I did find the characters so funny at times. The 2 main characters had to grow on me for a little bit before I got pulled into the storyline. I love that this mystery takes place mostly on an island that the characters sailed to. I liked and did not like some of the characters, but they were written to be like that. I did not see the twist coming, and they were really good. Stayed up until 4 a.m. Could not put this down. I don't know, I feel like most of the 5-star reviews on here are about people who have like loved her writing before, and then a lot of them are just them like giving a description about the book or thanking people for the arc. But I guess I'm kind of the same way. Like, I don't usually like reviews on Goodreads, but I feel like if I were, I would read them. Like I would put the ones that like I didn't enjoy. I wouldn't necessarily be like, I guess the only reviews I think I've left are on books that I enjoyed. This last one that I want to look at, I am curious about because this was one that I rated, I think 3 stars. It's maybe like a 2.5, 3. I was just very disappointed by it, and I want to see like if other people agreed. And that is The Housemaid is Watching by Frida McFadden. This came out just in June. So this one so far has 3.89 as its average rating, and it has 376,000 ratings on Goodreads. The third one is good too, but not my favorite. The third of the series usually isn't that great. Reading the sentence in the book made me laugh out loud because it perfectly sums up this book and the Housemaid series. Boring, I wasn't gagged at all. A couple throwbacks to the other books were cool, and characters coming back into the story was a nice touch, but not enough to make up for the absolutely boring storyline and eye-roll plot twists. Did the twists and turns of Millie and Enzo's last adventure have you gripped? Honestly, Frida, no. Hell no. What was the point of Janice? Why was Enzo written to be so annoying in this book? What was the point of the flirting and the husband not caring? Absolutely not. We lost the plot. DNFing this book at 50% because what is this? The first 2 books in the series were so good and this seems like someone else wrote it. I almost DNF'd this book because nothing was happening, and I remember talking about that during my 24-hour reading challenge. I was like, nothing's happened. I'm like almost 200 pages in and nothing's happened, and then I read like I think another like 20-30 pages and finally like there was a plot twist. There was like some excitement. I need to stop reading her books. This book was not good and was wholly unnecessary. It completely lacked the compelling nature of the first 2 books. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm just starting to read The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. It's her newest release. And so I'm excited to read because now I have the 3 books in the Housemaid trilogy, and then I have 3 other books of hers. So I really hope that I do enjoy her other books, but I loved her writing style. So I'm hoping like it carries through. Alright, so then the 5 stars on this one. Oh my goodness, quick confession, I didn't expect to love the 3rd book so much, but it exceeded all my expectations. It's far better than the 2nd book. I couldn't put it down. I even canceled my appointment with my accountant, who, even though I have taxes to do. The Housemaid is Watching is an addictive, riveting, tense, and thrilling page-turner in the Housemaid trilogy. I had a hard time putting this book down, and I was completely dazzled by the story. I love the drama, the mystery, the doubt, the secrets, and the lies. I feel like this book, because it jumped ahead in the future and there was like, I don't know, I feel like the characters didn't progress the way I thought them to. Like, I feel like the people they were in this book weren't who they were before, and that kind of disappointed me a little bit, specifically Enzo. Yeah, he just kind of disappointed me a little bit. Like, in the end, it kind of came back that he was, like, still himself, but throughout the whole majority of the book, I was like, that's not the Enzo that I know. Like, this seems odd. This was a book, maybe if you really, really loved the characters, to me this was less of a mystery thriller book and more of just, like, a continuation about the characters in the rest of the series. But those are the 10 books that I'm looking at today. I feel like this would be a fun thing to do at like the end of each year. So I probably won't do it this year, but I think it'd be fun at the end of the year to like look at my books that I rated 5 stars for the year and see like what other people thought about them and the people who didn't like them, like why they didn't like them. I don't get super defensive about books. Like, I know some people are like ride or die fans of books, and if someone says something that doesn't match their opinion, like, people freak out. But I think it's fun to look at some of the bad reviews and be like, okay, yeah, like, I feel that that's valid, but know that like I was able to look past that and still love the book as a whole. But if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I post videos every week. They're supposed to be every Friday, but honestly, work and homework has gotten a bit chaotic, but I still try to post every week. And like I said, I mostly do reading videos. I'm gonna try and get a few more like reading vlogs going here soon, because this week I have a bunch of homework due, but I have a little bit of a break after this, so I'm hoping to kind of get back into some reading. but I really hope to see you guys next week, and thank you guys for watching.